Hi, this is John Bailey. Yesterday we talked about sales contracts and we talked about a lot of the intricacies of documents and who can sign them and who can write them and how they're drafted. Today we're going to talk about a couple of other things that I think would be at least as interesting. The first one is going to be the exclusive right to sell listing agreement. This contract calls for it's an agreement between the agency and the homeowner as to who's going to do what, for what period of time, what price the home is going to be offered for, how much compensation is going to be paid at the time a buyer is produced. I would like to mention that you can't have any kind of an agreement without an expiration date. If it doesn't have an expiration date, it cannot be a valid contract. So you can't have any open-ended agreements, such as, I'll put it on the market until I get a buyer. Also, in this document, we've got several other things, such as who holds the earnest money, putting up for sale signs, what the broker's responsibilities are, what the owner's responsibilities are. We have a property information seller property disclosure clause that states that the homeowner has got to fill out a contract that says this is what I know about the home. It's a disclosure. It's required by the state of South Carolina law. Also, it allows the broker to put the home into the multiple listing service, whether we can disclose names, things of that category, how to market the property, internet marketing, mediation. I mean, there's all kinds of agreements and things that are contained in these, and of course they can be modified. One of the things that's important in this is permission to act as a dual agent. The problem is, if a homeowner puts a home up for sale with a broker and doesn't allow the broker the opportunity to market the home and hopefully get a buyer himself, then he's basically taking the broker and tying one arm behind his back. So in the event that the broker is able to produce a buyer, which may be someone that he's already currently working with, then you have to enter into what's called a dual agency agreement. The dual agency agreement allows the broker the privilege of being able to represent both parties. The most important thing is that all the documents have to be put on the table for all to discuss. Everybody has to be fully informed. What happened was the real estate commissioner took what had been done underneath the table for many, many years and put it on top of the table back in the 80s to let people know what their rights are. And I fully applaud all the measures that the real estate commissioner has taken and what they have done. Very important, because people need to know what their rights are. We don't want to take anything for granted. Years ago, the expression used to be caveat emptor. That means let the buyer beware. Today it's more caveat vendor, let the seller beware. The seller needs to understand that everything has got to be disclosed if in the event that they knew that there was a buried tank underground that had filled with oil and it was leaking into the ground, and they didn't tell that to the buyer, and the buyer closes on the transaction only to find out later that there's a problem and that he has to spend thousands and thousands of dollars to have it removed. He could go back to the seller and sue the seller. So the point is that everything has to be disclosed. The next document is a buyer agency contract. For a buyer to come walking into the office and sit down and say, yes, I want you to represent me to find a home, it's basically another listing agreement. Those words, listing agreements, typically refer to when a home is put on the market for sale. This is referring to a buyer. You're technically listing a buyer. You're going to represent this buyer. This buyer is going to be represented by the agent, and the agent's going to take care of all the documentation for the buyer, represent his interest, negotiate a smooth transaction at a good value and a good price for the buyer. So the next time we sit, we'll talk about other forms that we have to use in the real estate agency. Thank you very much for listening.